All right, welcome back to another episode of She Will Not Fall. It is season 2, and of course, we are talking about liberation. And I have another wonderful guest today, Alyssa. I met her on Twitter. I feel like I've met a lot of people on Twitter.
That's how I meet everyone these days.
I mean, like, that's been the community. And so I knew I wanted to have you on the podcast. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your invitation and follow-up invitation because I was all over the place moving. So I'm so excited that we can finally meet and have this conversation.
Of course. So for season 2, for us to kind of get to know the personalities of the guests just a little bit, and I know it's a hard question. Everybody said it's a hard question, but if you had to describe yourself as a song title or book title, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, Marielle. So, okay, my first answer, and I told you this before we started, I asked my husband and he said, go look at Taylor Swift's discography. Oh, okay. Well, the first one I picked, just based off the title, was Mirror Ball. Because, I feel like I got a lot of angles and I don't know, that's what I was going for. But then he totally nixed it and I'm saying it anyway. So when he listens to this, he's going to be like, Alyssa, that's not what we rehearsed. Because he was like, what if someone listens to it and that's not describes you? Anyway, so I guess my formal answer will be Sarah Bessey is one of my favorite authors, and the first book that connected me to her work is called Jesus Feminist. And when I was thinking about that question, that book title just kept coming back to me just because I feel like those two things really describe me and my passions well. And even I feel like there's a lot underneath the surface to that too. So that's going to be my answer. Jesus Feminist by Sarah Bessey.
I love it. I love that. So I think that's going to play a good piece into our conversation. I sense it. So yeah, of course, we're talking about liberation this season. And usually, there are communal definitions for liberation for different groups of people. But I always kind of like to start with the person. So for you, what does liberation look like for you? What do you need in a space or from folks for you to feel liberated? And how do you define that?
So I always think of liberation and freedom connected and not in a patriotic sense at all. That could be another conversation for another time. But I think about it in terms of the self and the true self. And it was funny because as I was thinking through this, I thought, let me take a pause and brush up on season 2 trailer of the podcast. And then I was like, oh no, I am stealing Marielle's answer. But then I thought, no, it's perfect because you said the same thing before I even listened to it. And that's totally how I identify, is just coming into your true and authentic self.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the consensus is for most of us, it is being able to be authentic, because I think in so many spaces we can't. It's you can't really be your whole self. And I was telling a friend, I was like, it is a privilege for a person never to have to think about they could just show up wherever they are and just be their whole selves. And that's a privilege that I don't think people realize they have, because for so many of us, unfortunately, we have to kind of code switch in order to survive in certain, spaces. And I just want to be me. And I think I'm at that point now where it's whatever, I'm just going to show up and be myself, because it's exhausting trying to be a chameleon, in these different places. And it's no, I just want to be myself. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. And I think the first step is really understanding who your true and authentic self is. And I think accepting that with grace and how that will evolve too. That's been a really big journey for me this past year, because I've been doing a chaplain residency. And part of the program is people always think like, oh, when you're doing a chaplain residency, like you're just learning how to serve patients. It's like, actually, it's like JS Park on Twitter described it as like a spiritual surgery. And I thought, ooh, like that cut me deep, because that's exactly what this experience is. And like really understanding like who my true authentic self is.
Oh, that's really good. Since we're talking about that, can we talk a little bit about the work that you're doing and how you are seeing liberation show up in those spaces, especially with families that are grieving? Because you've been a chaplain during the midst of COVID. So kind of tell me how that's been for you, and like just tell us a little bit about the work that you do and the ways that you are seeing liberation kind of show up in those spaces.
I became a chaplain like in the midst of the pandemic. So freakishly enough, like that's my only context for chaplaincy. And that's starting to evolve now, like as we're going into like a like slower part of the pandemic. And I kind of step back and I'm like, oh yeah, it's not like, this is not really like normal, but this is my normal. So as a chaplain, I accompany sick people, people that are in pain and the dying, which is my favorite. Like I love being with people at end of life. And I find like in many ways, my care seekers, I've never heard someone use the word liberation, but as I was thinking about this question, I see how like they are searching for liberation in a lot of ways, whether it's through treatment or they just want to be heard in connection to treatment, or in relation to like being in the hospital is like raising another experience for them. And I guess let me take a step back and like explain what a chaplain is and does, because I totally jumped in without sharing that. So a chaplain, a lot of people, you might like have an image in your head about what a chaplain is, but we simply offer spiritual and emotional support to people. And we're trained in our faith, and we just meet people where we are. Like that is my simplest definition. So although I grew up Christian and like that's my language and I'm ordained, it's not like an evangelical or evangelistic type ministry. It's really like identifying what support and like resources people have and like highlighting that back to them. So I have this quote on my desk that I feel like describes like the work that I do and how liberation can show up for my care seekers. It says, a healer does not heal you. A healer is someone who holds space for you while you awaken your inner healer so that you may heal yourself. And I feel like liberation and freedom like is in all of us. It's maybe just a matter of recognizing like the power we have to like come into that. And I feel like as a chaplain, that's a big part of my work, whether I'm advocating for a patient to staff or even to families so that they can hear what this person's wishes or concerns are, or helping staff that are feeling oppressed by other staff or even a patient. You know, we've heard a lot about the workplace violence experience like surge with healthcare workers right during the pandemic. So yeah,
I was gonna ask that. Like, I know that you've been with families, but I've been curious about the doctors and the nurses, because I'm sure, especially at the height of the pandemic and then that second surge, just the emotional toll that I'm sure that has had on the staff, right?
yeah,
You know, and just probably your presence there can be calming, because I can only imagine how overwhelming all of that has been, especially, you know, with hospitals being at capacity, and, you know, and then you still have to deal with patients who were not dealing with COVID. And so trying to do all of those things. Yeah, I can only imagine the grief that sits in that space. And, I've been really thinking about, all of doctors, nurses, those who are there in the hospitals, because you're seeing all of that. And just the trauma, I think.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that has to be heavy. That has to be a lot. But I like something that you said when you're talking about interfaith work, because I think a big issue that I see with a lot of us who identify as Christians is we don't know how to help love on, be compassionate towards other faiths, and being able to be in community with them. And I think we miss out when we don't do that. And I think that's a part of liberation, is to get out of your own bubble. How has that helped you? Because I'm sure you've had to deal with families that didn't believe at all, or, how has that, before you even started your residency, now that you've been in the middle of it, what's kind of shifted for you, because you've had to do interfaith work and dealing with patients and families who didn't believe like you, but still be a comfort and love on them and be community?
Yeah. So, well, that's such a good question. In the beginning, when I would encounter people who, let's say they were angry a chaplain showed up, because they have this idea of a chaplain, the anger that I would feel, it would make me I know people listening, you can't see me, but I'm curling into myself. I'd be like, okay, bye. And I would just leave. You don't need me here. That's fine. But really, there's a lot, in my training, I've learned to be there's a lot underneath that anger and an opportunity to lean in. So I have a choice there, right? Whether it's there was a faith element there, or not. And for me, I really try to focus on accessing compassion, on a foundational level, not just, oh, you say you're a Christian and I'm ordained, so we connect. To be honest, I really don't connect with a lot of Christians, just because of how I experience my own faith and spirituality.
Yeah.
So the foundational for me is accessing compassion on a human to human level. And that is what I try to keep in my mind, when those experiences come up, when I'm encountering people who are very different from me, because my theology is that everyone deserves care and compassion, because they are human and because they are made in the image of the divine, not because of the faith tradition that they adhere to or the works that they do or how much money they make, just because they're there in front of me. That's the sole reason that I can love that person. And that can be really hard when these other things come up, right? I had a patient recently that they were very angry, and it wasn't the anger that made me uncomfortable, it was the things that they were saying that was it kept creating these barriers. And I just remember in my mind, I'm this is a human in pain. This is a human in pain. Just trying to focus on that so that I could love them and be present well.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't identify or connect with a lot of people who identify as Christians, because I see things, I think, differently. I think a key piece for me with liberation is I literally want all people to be free. You don't have to believe like I do, think like I do, walk like I do. I want us to be able to walk in the wholeness of who we are, but like you're saying, being able to connect with people on a human and a compassion level. That's what I long for. That, because I think some of us, and I don't know about how you grew up, but sometimes I feel the way that certain theology was presented to us is we take care of our own, because we're in this world, we're not of it, so we need to have our own thing, but we don't care about those people out there. Right. Only time we care about the people out there is when we're gonna go on a missions trip. But that was it. This is our world. And then missions trips were a lot of times trying to convert people over and disrupt their rituals and practices. That's a whole nother topic. But, you know, but to me, the power of God is through the connection of humanity, and that we're connected, and that we can love each other and still be in community together and all of those things and become better, even though we don't agree, let's say religion wise, that we become better in who we are because we are connected. So I love that. I really think that I wish all of us could get to that place, to that place, because go ahead.
Well, it's like, you're just making me laugh because I had someone recently in the hospital say that to me. They're like, I admire you because I have my faith, and my faith says that this is the way that it is and everyone else is wrong. But you, and it was like they were kind of putting me up on this pedestal, and I was just giggling because I'm like, but we all have that capacity. I mean, I believe, and like maybe it's naivety, but like I really believe like we all have the capacity to love everyone or to love others, not because of their faith, but just because like they're there and they're human. And it's like I have found it's a kind of like, I guess, a discipline or a training. Like I hope for it, and I also know that is a work we have to do because we're not naturally going to love people that feel difficult, you know, or people that look different than us. Like we have to work for that.
Absolutely. Do you feel like, and I know, you know, I kind of wanted to shift here, but I'm just curious. So of course, one of the things that we've been talking about this season is systems of oppression and things and how we can knock down those systems. And kind of what we're talking about, I feel, is a system. Like, I feel like when we're told that only our group of people who think like us, only people who think like us matter. I feel like that is a system meant to divide and meant to almost strip away basic human compassion. And I don't know if you agree with that, or if you want to expound upon that a little bit more, and maybe what you've seen just in your residency, how that maybe has played out, and maybe ways that we can remove those barriers, to me, I think, again, a system that seeks to divide us as opposed to unite us.
You know, I've always thought about, I think, or at least for this question, I thought about like macro systems, but now that like as we're talking, I'm just thinking about it like, yeah, that belief a person has is kind of like a micro system in a way. And I've always been like a curious questioner, and that, you know, that gets me in trouble. And that's why I went to seminary, because I just had all these questions. So I guess for me, like if I have, you know, I have these thoughts, but I've also always had questions. So I've always wanted to look at the other side, or just be curious. And I kind of wonder maybe if that's what's like missing, is like this curiosity. Like, I mean, I love certainty as much as the next person, right? But I feel like nothing in this world is like guaranteed to be certain. So I wonder, you know, how much curiosity could play a role in knocking down these types of systems. Just being open and wondering.
Yeah, that's so good, because I've never really thought about this. So we're unpacking this in real time. This is great. So
yes.
I think curiosity is a huge part of liberation. And the problem that I think a lot of people can't have liberation is because curiosity is stripped from them based off of religious reasons, right? So like you are given, like you're saying, you're given certainty. Like you are given this, and it's like, this is what's true. And even if you are naturally curious, most times a lot of spaces don't welcome that.
Or it's been trained out of you.
That part, right? So I think that is a beautiful idea, is that there has to be some form of curiosity that can lead to people's liberation, because that makes you explore. That makes you ask questions. That makes you consider, like, is there something else? And so many folks have had that stripped from them. So for instance, a lot of people feel like you can't question God, because people have told them you can't do that. Like, God is God. And I'm like, if I would never serve a God that would buckle under the weight of my questions, like that don't even make sense. Like I should be able to bring questions to God. I should be able to bring my anger to God. Like I always say, God is a big spirit. God can take care of God's self. Like God is not intimidated. So I think so often in our religious spaces that gets stripped from us and we're not able to be curious and ask questions. We are given what somebody has told us, this is certainty. That's beautiful. I don't think I've ever thought about that before.
I haven't either until we started talking about it. My curiosity, I guess, led to that, because I also wonder, like, at least for me and like my experience, say like in church and being curious, it was always like, oh, well, even if you start to question, then you get married to what's on the other side. But like in my real life experience, like that has not been true at all. I can be curious and want to know about, say, a person that has a different faith than me, but that doesn't mean like their whole thing is going to become my own. It's just like, oh, okay, now I know. And I feel like in that, like that's where the compassion can come, because then I can better understand a person and be able to connect with them. And then it's like, okay, that's an open door, not like, whoa, I got sucked in and now I lost myself.
And that's what we were taught. Like, to me, if something is certain, if you're telling me something is truth, right? Me going to explore it and test it to see if it actually is truth will not damage it in any way. So for me, it makes sense that you should encourage people to go explore. Like, this is what we're saying. But we want you to go and explore and investigate and be curious and ask questions and all of those things, because truth will never not be truth. Truth will never bend. Truth, like it's not. So if this is truth, I don't care what you go do. Like I don't care how it's going to stand. So I think that is a really critical piece of that. And I want people to have more exploration. Like and for me, like as a person who identifies as a Jesus follower, I'm really starting to have a problem and struggle with calling myself a Christian just because of some of the things. I'm just being honest.
I hear you.
But as a person who is a Jesus follower, there are tenets in other faiths that I think are beautiful and that like I sit with, right? Like, so it does not strip away my belief, in Jesus. But for me, I love pillars of other faiths. I love how they see something, and I have adopted that, like that I connect to that. So we can learn from each other, even though we may not agree.
Right. Yeah. That reminds me of one of my like favorite quotes or ideas. I can't quote it perfectly, but Rob Bell, everyone hold on. Okay. Like I love Rob Bell, so don't burn me. But he talked about the divine kind of being like a gem and like, or say like a diamond, and like you, like every time you turn it, like you see something differently, or like the light hits it differently and like from different angles. And I just, when you're talking about like different tenets, because that's totally how I experience and practice my spirituality too, is like there's like these different like beauties and truths coming in to like my understanding of the divine, like every time I look, or at a different angle, or I'm curious, and it just like continues to enrich my experience.
That's beautiful. I love that. So as you think about what you want to work on for the future and what you are seeing ahead, what are some ways that you want to continue liberative work? Will you stay in the chaplain space, or do you see something else that you would like to do, and to keep helping people with liberation?
I totally, my dog is in here with me, and he, I guess, has an answer too. I don't know if you can hear him, but he's back there speaking up. I have totally fallen in love with the work of chaplaincy, because I never know who I'm going to meet on the other side of that door. Like, I really feel the interfaith piece enriches me. So that's where I hope to stay. And it challenges me as I continue to learn how to love other people well, learn how to speak up, increase my conflict management and resolution skills. I find that that's really important, like in chaplaincy, in healthcare, and especially when we think about liberation, right? Because I
Yeah.
feel, liberation is really important in community and helping come alongside other people. And when someone feels like they don't have a voice, someone else can speak up for them. And I find that a lot in my work.
I love it. Yeah. I just had this memory, like a few years ago, my mom, she was having some type of surgery. Like it was like it wasn't the major surgery she would have later on, but they were doing like an exploratory surgery, trying to figure something out. And I remember sitting in the waiting room. I'm pretty sure it was at Emory. And there was a family, I think they were like an Indian family, and they were like behind us. And I remember them circling up and they started praying, but I knew they weren't Christians, right? But I was listening to them pray in their tongue and in their expressive religion. And I felt so connected. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, because I'm sitting there. They were like right next to me, and there was such a beauty in that. Like, and I remember I started praying, but in my faith for their family member, because I think something serious was going on. And I think about that moment sometimes, and I'm like, we genuinely are like, I didn't know
We're
what
so
they were
connected.
We're so connected. It's like, I didn't know what they were saying, but I could feel the human emotion of them crying out to their higher power, to the person that they're like, we don't know what's about to happen. And so I remember sitting there and I started praying for their family member. I didn't know who their family member was, what was going on, but that moment, it felt so beautiful and sacred, and I felt connected to it. That was super powerful for me, because I think that was the first time I was like, wow, like this is what being like truly interconnected really means. Like, we probably have totally different life experiences, totally different faiths, but listening to them cry out and pray just felt like I was right there with them. Like, I could understand every word they were saying, though I didn't.
Yeah.
Like, it was amazing. It was really powerful.
I feel like that contributes to like liberation on both sides, right? Because imagine if, it's the total opposite were to happen. Like, God forbid someone came in and was like, no, you can't do that here. Like, that's not allowed. But instead it like created this like feeling of like love and support and openness. And I'm just thinking about like, where is that family now? Oh, they probably are like carrying that love with them and continue to feel liberated that they can show up in spaces and like practice that. And the same for you, because then you're probably like can exercise that in other opportunities too.
Yeah, I don't know why. It triggered that thought. And I just
That's so
remember
beautiful.
that memory. Yeah. So I am really grateful for the work that you are doing. I know that especially during the midst of the pandemic was a lot. I can only imagine, like I say, the trauma and the grief and all of those things. And so your presence was needed. Before we end this, I do want to ask this question, because I do think this is an important part of liberation, and that is self-care. And because you have had to be with families who are grieving, you've seen death, you've seen, people be in a space of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. And that can be a lot, like, to carry that and all that. So what are some ways that you are engaging in self-care and, to try to care about people, but not try to take all of that on? Because you know what I'm saying? What are some ways that you've tried to rest and take care of yourself so you can continue to do the work that you're doing?
Rest is so foundational for me and my work personally. Like, I cannot I cannot go to work having only slept like 2 hours. Like, I know I cannot be my best self
Yeah.
type of thing. My educator like has said this to me a few times, and it's always stuck with me, like especially when I've been processing like really difficult experiences that have stuck with me more than others. And like at the end of me rehashing everything, he'll say to me, "Can you let them go?" And that has really stuck with me because in some ways, you know, I really believe the people that I meet, that I get to love and be present with, they'll always be a part of the tapestry of my life. You know, I feel like they taught me so much, and I really, if I see their name come up, like I can recognize like their names. So they're with me, but also I've had to let them go in a way of recognizing, you know, I was there in that space for a time and a reason, and there was a beginning and an end. And when I leave that space, I have to, you know, like release, I guess, my role in a way. And that has been a big learning curve, especially as a helper, you know, and a ministry leader. That's really hard because you love your people and you want to keep doing, but also I feel like being is the most important, and there can be an end to the being with people. So I guess that's part of my answer. And then the other part is like, I really just try to turn it off when I'm home. I really think having fun is important because I watch people die all the time, and there's a lot of beauty and sacredness and gratitude in that. But also, like, I love to have fun, and I think chaplains are like some of the silliest people like you'll ever meet. We love to crack jokes and have fun, and I have a lot of dogs, so when I'm home I just love to spend time with my family and my dogs and read books and just do things that nourish me. Drink tea, eat good food, you know, really listening to my body and what she needs, I feel like is important for my self-care and how that evolves too.
Yeah, I think what you said, can you let them go, is it made me think about, and don't ask me like who the person was in the scripture. I'm sorry. I'm not there yet. Maybe after seminary, but I'm not there yet. So where basically to shake the dust off of your feet once you left that city and you move to the next. And I think in the context, it was saying, go there, do it. If people don't receive it, that's fine. Shake the dust off your feet and go on. But I see it in a different way. It's when I have engaged with someone, this was this moment, that once it is done, let it go. Like shake the dust off your feet and then move to the next assignment. And that's kind of what I got from that, because I think I'm like you, like I hold on to like things and people. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's like, no, I did what I was supposed to do. That was for this season, this moment, this time. Let that go, because I got to move on to the next thing. And so I'm still learning that, because sometimes sometimes it's very hard.
Like those moments will come back to you. You know, I feel like there's like a little bit of like nuance there. You know, like I still think about the patients that I met 2 years ago or last year, but not in a like, oh, I can't stop thinking about them. But it's like that moment is still teaching me.
Yeah, that's good. I hold on to things in that where I still feel everything. And it's like, I have to learn to let it be a memory, but also, like you say, a consistent teachable moment for me, but not to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done this and this and that. Like, that's the anxiety part. But
I hear you.
Still learning to do that. So, yeah. So first of all, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast. You know, I've been wanting you on for a little bit, so it feels good to have the conversation. Before we wrap up this episode, what are some ways that people can follow you? If there's anything that you want to promote, feel free to do so. How can we follow you and support you?
Well, when I'm online, I'm mostly on Twitter, and that handles ARP DeWitt, DEWITT. I love Twitter. I think it can be, you know, like a dumpster fire, but also really beautiful. So if you want to connect, that's where I am. I have a website and a newsletter, but I'm not really writing just because of the season that I'm in right now. I don't have capacity. So I hope to start, maybe in the summer. So you are welcome to go to my website. It's the same as my handle, arpdewitt.com. But yeah, thank you so much. This was so fun and so timely too, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm grateful. And like I say, I'm really grateful for the work that you are doing, because it is really, really needed. And I remember being in that space, just needing that comfort, and just how great the chaplains were. Like, they were just a lifeline, because I thought I was gonna go crazy. Like, it was a lot. It was like, but chaplains are such a critical piece to that, and to just bringing calm and peace and all of those things. So thank you for what you're doing. And then, of course, again, thank you for spending a little time with me on the podcast.
Thank you so much.